We have the much awaited new Shimano GRX 12-speed Di2. Remember, there's a slightly peculiar move by Shimano when they launched 12-speed GRX that they only launched mechanical, and we've kind of been waiting for the electronic one ever since. Well, it's finally here. Couple of really easy things that we can just tick off. As you expect, it goes to that semi-wireless system, so it now works with the ED50, the narrower gauge wires, and it just connects to the battery, the mechs, and then it's wireless up to the shifters. Unlike the 105 though, there are a couple of ports here so that you can plug in a cable and run it, a hardwired connection if you want, and you can also run some satellite shifters as well. So essentially, this is an Ultegra lever, but with the GRX ergonomics. So it also has the little extra shift button here like you find on Ultegra and Dura Ace, but that button's on the side like the old generation of GRX rather than on the top. So here's the thing though, is that the lever and brake together is almost a £400 unit. So it's about 50 quid more if you take RRP prices than the Ultegra lever and brake set. So it's more expensive and it's heavier. In fact, 221 grams, which puts it at the same weight as a 105 lever, and they're all compatible. I have just checked all this with the eTube app, and I can say that we've got, a 105 mech will work with a GRX lever, a GRX lever will work with a 105 mech. That all seems to work seamlessly as you would kind of hope, I guess. So that does put it in a slightly weird price bracket because the mech is the other way around. So the GRX mech, which I'll come to in a second, is slightly cheaper than an Ultegra one, even though it's got more features on it. So kind of a weird mix and match sort of going on here, and I think for a few riders they might be tempted to mix and match components, are probably a bit more than Shimano expected. Anyway, let's take a look at this lever because this is really what we're shouting about. Shimano have really tried to talk about the ergonomics and the design of the new GRX lever, which is kind of interesting because it comes just a couple of weeks after the SRAM Red launch. And I've been waxing lyrical about the ergonomics, which is why I had this in the background. Because right now I believe that SRAM have absolutely got the march on lever ergonomics, and as soon as they get this into Force and Rival, it's superb. So I was interested to see whether Shimano also had some decent lever ergonomics up their sleeves as well. The first thing is that definitely the lever hoods are a significantly better fit. They instantly are a tighter fit, they're more shrink wrap, they don't move around as much, and they've got way more little tabs and sort of mouldings in here that are trying to keep everything in place. That's something that SRAM really failed at. Other than that, the design is actually quite similar. They've gone for a very angular looking sort of Tron-esque design, similar to what SRAM are doing. So maybe this is a bit of a modern trend coming away from the sort of the curvy look of the Ultegra and heading towards this slightly more angular design signature. The GRX also has these elevated ridges, which I know is sort of a love-hate. People who ride bare hands don't tend to like this as much and prefer the smoother feel of these. So I do think we're going to see more and more riders mixing and matching Shimano components an awful lot more. Also, where the brake exit is, this hose does protrude. So when you're doing your bar taping, you have to be aware of how you cover up these gaps so you don't end up with sort of sharp edges around where the riders are going to have their hands. I fitted one of these levers up to a slightly flared bar to sort of get my head around what the ergonomics look like, so I don't have time to fit this to a bike. And also, bizarrely, we don't have a full group set here. More on that in a second. This has really only got space for 3 fingers. I can't get 4 fingers in here the same way as I can with the SRAM. And also that 1 finger brake in, where I'd want to put it is only just about activating the brake. Now that seems crazy because that is actually a massive improvement, but compared to the SRAM shifters where I can actually ride here on those and still activate the brake with my little finger, there's no way I can do that here. The other thing I was dead interested in is whether they've been paying attention to the feedback they're getting in terms of reach adjust. So the reach adjust is still at this little screw here, and we're looking for this gap here. So this is wound all the way out. And if I wind this in, there we go, that is all the way, and that is nowhere near as much reach adjust as you're getting on the SRAM Red. Shimano have also always been famous for their slightly pointless contact point adjust, and so the contact point adjust is just back here, and if you keep an eye on this little tab here, as I change this, you can see sort of the level of contact point you get, which is just that little bit there is all you get in terms of contact point. Now what that does is it adjusts how much free stroke you have. So when you're on the hood and you just got that back, maybe just resting your hands on the brakes, how much you've got just to rest your hands before the brakes start to kick in, essentially. So there's not a massive amount of adjustment in there. Most people I know just wind that all the way in and leave it there and just sort of forget it as a feature because it's fairly pointless. A couple of little layout changes just to note with this. So the extra button comes here on the side, and on the top here is where we see our batteries. So this is fairly similar to the Shimano 105 system, where we have 2 batteries under this little cover here. These are the 1625 batteries, I believe, so a slightly more unusual shape. Now, easy enough to get from Amazon and places like that, but not quite as common as your CR2032s that you can pretty much pick up in every hardware store and off license, etc. So yeah, last sort of final thoughts on the lever. I think a good upgrade, but I don't think they've gone far enough. Okay, before we look at the mechs, quick look at the brake calipers. And when I say quick look, I mean literally nothing has changed at all. Here is our Shimano GRX 12-speed rear derailleur, only for a 2x setup. So this will take a 11 through to 34 or 11 through to 36 cassette. You can't go any bigger than that, which puts it almost identical to the Shimano 105 rear derailleur. And when you put these two together, they look virtually identical. There's a larger pulley wheel here on the GRX, and it obviously has the clutch in there as well. But other than that, they are very, very similar designs. There's a few little design tweaks which makes the GRX more similar to the Ultegra. Some little refining details just around the pivots, etc., which probably aesthetically matches it more to the Ultegra. But remember, Ultegra is meant to max out at 1134. I know lots and lots of people, myself included, have tried it with an 1136. It does kind of work. It does put the chain under a little bit more stress, but it is a hack as opposed to a recommended, where this is up to 1136. So again, another reason why I think we're going to start seeing Shimano users mixing and matching the road and the gravel group sets a bit more. One, because you can, and 2, because I think you kind of need to in certain areas as well. Not a massive difference, to be honest, just an upgrade we totally expected, and it just matches. Now, the front mech does have a new interesting feature, and that is they've at last caught up with where gravel is going in terms of tyre width. So the new front mech now allows for another 2.5 millimeters of chain line. So I think Shimano had to do this because what we were finding was that more and more brands are bringing out models with wider tyres, and as such needed to move this faceplate away from those tyres and still get the chain lines to work. So the new front mech will definitely account for sort of wider axles and wider chain lines. So a welcome update that kind of keeps the whole GRX system relevant. And while we're talking about front shifting, there was a fairly interesting feature in the press release, but that doesn't seem to be activated just yet. And that is that now there's a firmware update that's going to roll out across all the ranges. So you have to do this on Dura Ace and everything, where the front shift can now just be a toggle button. So rather than having one button for doing an upshift, one button for doing a downshift, you can now just use one button to toggle the front mech. So whatever positions it in, it moves it to the other position. Simple as that, which means that you free up another button. So you essentially have 3 spare buttons for doing whatever you want. So you could allocate it to a shift function. You could use it to do something on your Garmin or your Wahoo. So it could be flip through the pages, or it could be start a lap timer, shortcut to the navigation screen. Or we've seen Wahoo roll out the idea of being able to control your GoPro. So maybe a button can be used for controlling the GoPro. Maybe it can turn on your lights. So maybe you just want to see a car coming towards you and brighten your lights so they can see you. You can do that on a Di2 button. But it kind of got me thinking, if you were to have a spare button on your Di2 cockpit, what would you do with it? Put it down in the comments below, because I'm asking, because I really do think that the way that the big 3 group set brands are going to stay ahead of the copycat China brands is by building in more and more integration, narrowing down their ecosystem, tying you into things that are going to be compatible with other parts. Like we've seen SRAM have now brought out a handlebar compatible with the zip handlebars, so all the brake lines integrate with it perfectly. It accounts for that extra 5mm. And all of this ties in with various Garmin and other software units. You know, if you're going to dream up what your ideal ecosystem might be like, put it down in the comments. I'll be really keen to hear your ideas. What's your imagination telling you right now? Okay, hope that video was somewhat useful. Again, get down there with your comments. I'm really keen to know, how are you looking at this and how are you imagining your next build? Let's find out. Thanks for watching. Take it easy.